Let me ask you something, okay? What are you hoping for right now? I don't mean in the grand cosmic sense of that, though we will get there. But I mean today, this week. Something that you've been quietly holding on to, maybe. Something you're not quite sure will work out, but you haven't let go of it yet. Because here's what I've come to understand, right, after 68 years of living. Hope is not a luxury, it's not a weakness, it's not the refuge of the naive or the uneducated for that matter, or the desperately faithful and religious. No. Hope is the architecture of human life. Without it, and I mean this in kind of complete seriousness, there is nothing. No reason to get up, no reason to plan, no reason to love someone or build something or endure the extraordinary difficulty life that at various points will absolutely insist on serving you. You know, the book of Proverbs puts it with devastating economy. It says, where there is no vision, the people perish, or if we want to put that into plain English, without hope, life is hopeless. Now, I guess that might sound circular, but it isn't, you know. It's probably the most important sentence that I can offer you today, one way or another. And everything that follows that is an attempt to unpack what it actually means. You know, we use the word hope, don't we, in a kind of casual way. We've almost worn out the real meaning of it. You know, I hope it doesn't rain. I hope the traffic isn't bad. I hope this works. You know, these are expressions of moral preference dressed up as hope. They're not hope. They're wishful thinking, and there's nothing wrong with wishful thinking, is there? But it won't sustain you when things get genuinely hard. Real hope, the kind worth talking about, is something altogether different. Faith, as I explored in the first part of this trilogy, it is a remarkable and necessary thing, but without faith, it's difficult to get by. But faith without a destination is like setting out on a long journey with complete confidence in your ability to drive, but absolutely no idea of where you're going. The confidence doesn't help you. You need somewhere to be heading, and I think that's what hope provides. It gives us a direction of travel, a destination, something on the horizon that makes the road worth travelling. And human love, as extraordinary as it is, and I really do believe it is extraordinary, has its limits. When things get genuinely dark, when loss arrives, as it will, it's bound to in this life. When the scaffolding of ordinary life collapses around our ears, human love, as beautiful as it is, cannot always reach the places that need reaching. Sometimes we need something beyond it. We need, I would argue, something to look forward to that exists beyond the boundary of what we can currently see. Now, I appreciate that some people will hear that and immediately think religion, and that they'll either lean in, or you're going to switch off, depending on where you sit on that question. Well, I'd ask you to stay with me either way, because that's what I want to explore today. Not whether you share my beliefs, that's between you and your conscience, isn't it? But what I want to explore is the nature of hope itself, where it comes from, what we do with it, and why, without it, we are considerably less than we could be. You know, there's an old saying, which you probably heard, that there are no atheists in the trenches. It stems from World War One, when things were really, really dire for those on the front line and in the trenches. And it's a generalisation, and I know that. There are brave and principled people who have faced the end of everything, with no belief in anything beyond it, and maintain that position with complete integrity. And I do respect that, I honestly do, more than I can say. But as a generalisation, as an observation about the broad sweep of human behaviour under pressure, I think it holds. When everything else is stripped away, when the comfortable certainties of ordinary life are gone, When the noise stops and the reality of our mortality sits quietly in the room with us, most people reach for something. Alexander Pope wrote that hope springs eternal in the human breast. It's one of those lines that has lasted because it points to something true, I think. Hope is not learned, it's not cultural. It is not the invention of one religion or philosophy. It's baked into us. It's part of the architecture of being human. Now Dante, on the other hand, I kind of find this a bit haunting, placed above the gates of hell the instruction to abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. The most complete description of damnation that he could imagine. And it wasn't about fire or pain or darkness or the burning tar pits or whatever else. No, it was the permanent taking away, irrevocably, the removal of hope. Which I think kind of tells you everything about what hope means to the human condition. Now, hope is also clearly frequently misplaced. I spent time many years ago working in a bedding shop, bookmakers, and I watched, and every single day, the effects of hope applied against logic, against probability, against the cold mathematics of decided that's always been going to make sure that the house comes out on top, that the house always wins. But people still came in every day. They came back day after day. Not because they were stupid, many were anything but. They came back because the need of hope for a better conclusion or outcome is extraordinarily powerful. People need that hope. They found it powerful enough to override the evidence that they were seeing, powerful enough to override their experience. The odds didn't matter as much as the feeling that this time, today, things might be different. Now, I'm not equating gambling with religion, I want to be clear about that, but I am saying they share a common root. The deep human need to believe that something better is possible, that the next chapter might be better than this one. And that need, it's not weakness. It's not something that needs to be fixed or corrected. It's just a signal to be understood. I've been fortunate, well blessed, call it what you want. And I've travelled widely through my life and my career for different reasons in different places. And one of the things that has struck me and has always struck me is the hope of something beyond this life. Is not the invention of one culture or one religion. It is, as far as I can tell, it's a universal human instinct. I stood once on the banks of the Bagmati River at the Pashupatinath temple, which is on the outskirts of Kathmandu in Nepal. One of the great Hindu temples. It dates back to the 5th century. And I could talk for quite some time about being there. It was really quite eye-opening and a very good experience. So I'm glad that I had. But I watched all kinds of things going on, and the main thing that was happening was that the deceased, those that had passed away, were being placed on burning rafts by their families and set upon the river. They were pushed out into the current and they floated away down the river receiving them and the flames doing their work. And all around me were the families. There was grief, but also woven into that grief something else entirely, a hope, a genuine, living, breathing hope that what was being released on the river was not ended, that the soul of the person they loved was moving towards a new existence, reincarnation, rebirth, the soul continuing its journey towards something greater than this life could contain. Buddhism also shares a vision of this hope, the soul moving through lives, accumulating wisdom and release, moving towards nirvana. And in much of Southeast Asia, and this fascinated me, the two traditions, Hinduism and Buddhism, intertwine so naturally that the gods of one appear in the temples of the other. And the hope is the same even when the language around it differs. Sikhism also speaks to the transmigration of the essence of the person, moving closer across lives to union with God. The hope again is orientated towards what comes after. Islam, promises paradise for the faithful, and many branches of Christianity, which is my own tradition, speak of heaven and resurrection and a kingdom to come. The specific theologies, they differ enormously. The arguments between traditions have, to put it mildly, I guess, not always been conducted peacefully, have they? But underneath it all, the same human question is being asked. The same hope is being expressed. Is this all there is? Or is there something more? And I guess for most of the last century, much of the prevailing mood in Western society anyway has been sceptical of all of this. Science, and I guess rightly so in many ways, has reshaped the way that we understand the physical universe, and in doing so for many people, it's appeared to make the case for God redundant, null and void. I understand this position, Well, I don't share it, but I think I understand it. But what I find interesting throughout all of this is, though, even in the eyes of the most secular societies, the underlying need doesn't seem to disappear. It just finds new objects. Even as late as 2003, in a Gallup poll, 90% of Americans supported the national motto, which is "In God We Trust." 90% in a country that often presents itself as the apex of rational scientific modernity. People put their trust in things they hope will benefit them. That's not irrational, that's human. The object of that trust, though, changes. Governments, science, institutions, brands, ideologies. But the underlying mechanism is identical to what drives a person to their knees in prayer. We are hoping creatures. The question is, I guess, never really whether to hope. It's more to do with what we put our hope in. And I guess, and I want to suggest that that's where the conversation really begins. Now, a friend of mine, who looking back at it was quite a wise man, he's passed away now, bless him, said something to me that I've never forgotten. He said, trust takes a lifetime to build and can be destroyed in seconds. Trust is built out of consistency in action over time. And he was right, and it applies directly to hope, because there is hope and then there is hope. There is the finger crossed variety, the lottery ticket, the vague wish that things, might improve, and the optimism that there's no real foundation beneath it, but we still have it. And then there is something that is completely different. Now, the Greek word that's used in the original New Testament text is elpis, that's the word that's used. And its meaning, when properly understood, is not what the English word hope has come to suggest. It doesn't mean maybe. It doesn't mean possibly. It doesn't mean I'd quite like this to happen. It's a joyful and confident expression of an expectation of eternal salvation. It's a confident expectation. Not a hope that might be dashed, nor a wish that might go unfilled, but it's a confident expectation. The kind that you have when you know the outcome, because you know the person or the one that promised it. And that distinction matters enormously to me, personally, because I think a great deal of hope that people carry, including people of genuine faith, is actually closer to wishful thinking than to this. We dress it up in language that sounds religious, but underneath there is a nagging uncertainty, a probably, a hopefully, and I understand why. We are so conditioned by the uncertainty of this life, by the experience of hoping for things and not receiving them, by the gap between what we were promised and what was delivered, by people, by institutions, and by circumstances. But I want to suggest that when we project that experience onto God, when we assume that divine promises operate the same way as human promise, we are making a category error of profound significance. I'm going to try and say something now that I find almost impossible to say adequately, but feel compelled to attempt. We are linear creatures. We move from one point to another, from birth to death, from Monday to Tuesday, from the beginning of this video to where you are now. Time for us is a river, and we are always downstream of where we were. Now God, if we take seriously what the scripture tells us and what I genuinely believe, is not linear. God exists, my God exists outside of time. The creation of time itself is attributed to the act of creation, which means that the Creator preceded it, which means past and future constraints are not applicable to him. In the Bible, the book of Hebrews says, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Now, Einstein famously struggled with quantum entanglement. He called it spooky action at a distance. The idea that two particles, separated by vast distance, could instantaneously affect one another, well, it troubled him greatly, because it appeared to violate the rules that he understood the universe needed to operate by. And yet, it's real. The universe does things that our models can't fully contain or explain. And if we struggle with all our science and all our mathematics to understand how something can be in two places at once, how particles separated by light years can be connected, do we really imagine that we're going to be able to measure God with the instruments we've built to measure creation? Now try this, right? Look out of the nearest window. Whatever you can see, a tree, a building, a street, now examining it more and more closely, past the naked eye, past the microscope, down to the cellular level, to the molecular level, to the atomic level, to the particles that make up the atoms, smaller and smaller until we've got no instruments to go further. Now, if you imagine knowing the position and state and relationship of every particle in every atom, in every molecule, in every object in the entire universe, every one of the billions upon billions of stars, every grain of sand, every drop of water, all of it simultaneously across all time. Imagine knowing all of that. And then adding to that, knowing exactly what every one of the 7 billion human beings being on this planet is thinking right now. All of them simultaneously, and knowing what each of them will do before they do it. I'm quite sure that even those 2 paragraphs are scratching the surface of what it means to speak of an all-knowing, omniscient God. We have chosen, quite confidently, to tell this being that he doesn't exist. And the implication of that I find quite staggering. If God already exists in the time in which his promises are fulfilled, if past and future are not constraints that apply to him, then a promise from God is not a hope in the conventional sense at all. It's already happened. The outcome is not uncertain, it is not pending, it is not subject to revision based on circumstances. When God promises something, he's not expressing an intention about the future. He's describing a reality that, from his perspective, already exists. To try to explain this, and I know that I'm reaching the limits of language here, is a little like trying to explain calculus to a very young child. The child can hear the words. It can perceive that something is being communicated. But the conceptual framework to understand what is being said simply isn't there yet. And to me, this is me speaking personally, all right? We are, in relation to God's knowledge, that child. And so when I talk about hope, the hope that is part of this trilogy that I'm putting together on faith, hope and love, I'm not talking about fingers crossed. I'm not talking about optimism against the odds. I'm not talking about a lottery ticket or a burning raft on the Bagmati River or a vague feeling that things might work out. I'm talking about a joyful and confident expectation of something that God has already secured. And the only question, to me, the only genuinely open question is whether I will be part of that. So I'm going to be a bit personal here, and forgive me if this is uncomfortable, because I think this is where it becomes real. You see, I believe believe, and I hold this belief with everything that I have, that God is present at the creation of every human life, and that there is something miraculous in the moment that a person comes into existence, that a life comes into existence. Not metaphorically miraculous, actually miraculous. And I believe that when a person dies, when the body ceases, as it will, as it must, what we might call the essence of that person, their spirit, their soul, call it what you want, whatever word you're comfortable with, reverts to God. And that my God, in his extraordinary knowledge and power and love, holds that person in his keeping. Now, I believe that Jesus is going to return. At that point, there will be a resurrection. So when Christ returns, as I do believe he will, those souls are restored, those people are restored. Not to the body that decayed, not to the limitations of the physical existence that they lived, but to something entirely other, something that I generally don't have adequate language for, immortal, spiritual, beyond the constraints that govern this life entirely. Now, my understanding of the scriptures suggests that not everyone will be resurrected. And I find myself in, I'm reluctant to speculate, if you like, too confidently about the criteria for who's in and who isn't. It feels like territory where arrogance is very easy and wisdom requires humility. But I believe that those who are raised and will never die again, that they will be, and I will use the word here carefully and deliberately, celestial. They'll be celestial beings of a kind that this existence gives us very little framework to discuss and to imagine. But to me, and what gives me great comfort, and I want to be honest about the fact that this is a personal comfort I'm talking about here. This is not a theological certainty or anything like that. It's the belief that among those who will be there are people that I've loved. And that this extraordinary future is not a solitary destination, but a reunion. That hope, that specific personal hope, is the only part of it that feels genuinely uncertain to me. Not because I doubt the kingdom is for God already accomplished. But whether I will be in the number of those that are there, that is the only question that I hold with anything other than certainty. And it should motivate everything. So, hope. Not wishful thinking, not optimism against the odds, not the purchase of a lottery ticket, dressed up in some kind of spiritual language. To me, no, hope is, the real hope, is a confident expectation of something that has already been secured by the only being in existence who has the power and the knowledge to secure it. And the question is not whether the kingdom will come, it will. From God's perspective, it already has. The question is only this: do you want to be part of it? I do, with everything that I am. And that desire, that hope, shapes how I try to live now. What I try to value, what I try to let go of, because nothing of this life, not the success, not the recognition, not the accumulation of anything, is the right thing to hope for, not ultimately. What's worth hoping for is almost beyond imagining. And the extraordinary, staggering and humbling thing is that it's already been promised by someone who keeps his promises. I hope, in every sense of the word, that wherever you are in your journey, in your own personal journey, something of what I've said here has been worth your time. Thanks for watching. God bless.